I'm not entirely sure what I'm doing right now. Ibslr. I'm bored, so let's record. Let me think about what I enjoy doing or what has been occupying my thoughts lately. Dopamine. It may sound like a narcotic, but we all know it's just a harmless substance in our body, right? Dopamine is extremely important for the functioning of a person. Dopamine is produced in several areas of the brain, including the substantia nigra and the ventral tegmental area, but that's not important. What is important is that it plays a significant role in the reward system. The reward system is made out of numerous things responsible for motivation and desire for reward, associative learning, and positive emotions. A reward is the attractive and motivational quality of a stimulus that triggers desirable and consuming behavior. I didn't just copy that from Wikipedia. Last line. A stimulus that triggers desirable and consuming behavior. Dopamine gets us out of our bed in the morning to mindlessly scroll Reddit, YouTube, Instagram, etc. But dopamine also gets us out of our bed to go to school or work. Dopamine drives our day, and that's simply because we want dopamine. We really want it. Everything you do in your life you do because of dopamine or in anticipation of receiving dopamine. Rats. Give us a great example. Researchers implemented a device which altered dopamine production in rats' brains as an experiment. They placed a lever in front of them which gave them dopamine whenever they pulled it. After a while, the rats would mindlessly pull the lever all day long. They would not mate, eat, or even sleep because they got enough satisfaction out of pulling the lever. The researchers also tried the opposite. They completely stopped the production of dopamine in the rats' brains. The rats responded the same. They were so lifeless, they did not mate, eat, or even sleep. They lost all of their motivation to live. Dopamine may seem like a bad thing after hearing all of this, but it really isn't. After all, a kitchen knife can be used to make food, or it can be used to murder someone. It's kinda the same with dopamine. Back in my time, we had to gather sticks and stones, look around for a few hours to find a small rabbit. We had to catch it, kill it, and then we could enjoy our daily dose of dopamine. Back in my time, we had to work extra hard to get dopamine. But now, with a few clicks on an electric mouse, we are on a YouTube page and we can get hours of dopamine without any problems. We can go to our fridge, grab a can of fizzy juice, and don't experience any consequences. Well, there are consequences, but I will get to that in a second. When we make decisions, we look at how much dopamine we're going to get as a result. We always choose for the highest amount of dopamine. Our brain doesn't care about the long-term effects. That's why it's so easy for us to spend hours eating Netflix and watching food. That's why it's so easy for us to spend hours watching Netflix and eating delicious foods, while it's hard for us to spend even 15 minutes of learning or working. Because it doesn't feel right for the brain. While working and learning and, for example, eating healthy do have much better long-term effects. Dopamine is great. It stimulates us to do things, but with how easy humans have made it for themselves, we also need to moderate the amount of dopamine we get. Otherwise, we will turn into one of those rats. If you manage to balance out your dopamine levels, you will find yourself enjoying work or learning or other hard things more than you used to do. And this is because almost everything you do releases some amount of dopamine. But the effect that amount of dopamine gives you depends on the average amount of dopamine you get. So if you decrease your average amount of dopamine you get for free by just clicking on a button, you can make the dopamine you actually work for have much more impact on you, which will make you enjoy harder things more. There are a couple of ways to do this, but there are two ways I would recommend. One, actually rewarding yourself. Don't wake up in the morning and immediately start exploiting your dopamine sources. Make it planning of what you want to do and don't just randomly reward yourself for doing nothing. I always make it planning in the morning. I write down the things I want to do that day, including the rewards I will get for doing the actual tasks. The way I reward myself is with minutes of fun. So for an example, I will write down, make a video, and on the side of that I will write 5 minutes of fun. So when I finish that task, I give myself 5 minutes of fun. This can be 5 minutes of whatever makes me happy without having a real purpose, like gaming or watching YouTube. Then I either make use of the 5 minutes right away, or I store them in my fun counter so I can make use of them later that day. At the beginning it is pretty hard to stick to your planning and not occasionally just check Reddit or something like that. But after you have accomplished a couple of tasks in the morning, you get into a flow and everything will become much easier and your day will become really productive. One more tip I can give you for this method is to do some easier tasks in the morning so you get into the flow. This way it will become much easier to do the actual harder tasks. Alright, method 2. This one is a bit controversial, so I suggest you do some research yourself into this subject. Dopamine detoxification. Short, dopamine detox. This is when you choose a day when you will quit any unproductive dopamine sources. Basically, you will restrict yourself from having fun at all on a particular day. The idea is that you do this at least once a week, so you will become less dependent on the high dopamine sources. My experience with this is not that positive, but that's just because I have tried it once, so I can't really speak a lot about my experience. I still think that on the long term this is something that could be really useful, and it should be at least something you could give a try. And that was it. That was the video. That was the video.